It's like, okay, well, where are we seeing that? We're seeing that at the knee. We're seeing that, Achilles tendon issues. And so, where can we throw an ISO hold and roll through that is, calf raise, different calf raise variations, or something like a leg extension or a single leg squat hold or a wall supported squat hold bilateral, something like that. Where we're challenging a quad. So different things for sure. I don't want to sit here and say it's like, oh, we're a calf raise leg extension program here, but again, it's just looking at the thing that works in our population, hopefully.
That was NBA strength coach Chris Chase talking about how he loads critical injury risk areas using exercises off of his trainable menu. You're listening to the Just Fly Performance Podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Simpli Faster. Simpli Faster is an online athletic performance technology shop distributing items such as the Freelap timing system, GymAware, K-Box, 1080 Sprint, and the Speed Mat. I've gotten many of these items from Simpli Faster and can confidently say that they make today's best training technology available to everybody. The Freelap timing system has revolutionized both my practices and my athlete assessments, allowing me to look at the 10-meter fly capability of dozens of athletes in a matter of seconds. It is wireless, compact, portable, and incredibly versatile. The K-Box and 1080 Sprint are fantastic tools for any coach looking to build speed, agility, and implement training scenarios that go beyond the traditional weight room. The 1080 Sprint is being used by great coaches training some of the fastest sprinters in the world, and it truly represents high-performance speed training. I can personally attest that Simpli Faster's customer service is second to none. Christopher at Simpli Faster responds quickly to queries, and anyone who makes a purchase from Simpli Faster is in good hands. If you want to acquire some of the best high-tech training equipment available, stop by simplifaster.com. That's simply with an I, faster.com. They are the future of coaching technology. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Just Fly Performance Podcast. I'm your host, Joel Smith. Thanks for being here today. And on the show today, we have Chris Chase, Director of Performance for the Memphis Grizzlies. When it comes to working with pro sports, through the blessing of doing this podcast, just talking with coaches in the industry, interns who have moved on and are working in the pro sports ranks, it's really amazing to hear the difference between working with pro sports and even on the college level. I mean, obviously, there's going to be a huge difference between like the middle school, high school level and the upper levels. But just how the game changes and how all the tools in the toolbox are used and manipulated to keep these players healthy for these long seasons with tons of travel. It's really an interesting area. I was just listening to the Tim Ferriss show with LeBron James and his trainer and just everything that goes into that. It's crazy, but it's fascinating. It's awesome to learn about. And so I'm super stoked to have Chris on the show today. He has previously served in the collegiate ranks, and he's had a few stops on the pro sector. He's also been S&C coach for the Atlanta Hawks. And before that, he was at the University of Southern California and then the University of Rhode Island. And so one of the things that I was really excited to dig in with Chris today is his trainable menu and then how he utilizes principles of the Postural Restoration Institute, or PRI, in just his exercise selection. How are you choosing to load your players throughout the course of the season in a way that benefits them and not what you're expecting as the coach, what your ego demands as the coach, but fitting the program to fit the players. So super cool talk today. Chris has been a guy in other podcasts I've had a huge respect for. His intelligence, the selection and thought process that goes into his system. So this is a super cool episode. On this one, we are going to talk about his go-to training methods and means for keeping his NBA players as healthy as possible while minimizing risk. As you heard in the teaser, there may be talk of using some machines. Oh, it's a crazy one, right? Like the old calf raise and leg extension machine. Like, where does that fit in? Like, I just think it's awesome to say, here's like, no tool is off the table, right? We tend to just say like, okay, you got to deep squat and you got to do these things. And if you don't do that, it's not a real strength program. But Chris just does a really cool job of adapting the program to the athletes, to the needs of his population. So we're also going to We're also going to get into jump testing, what kind of jump testing Chris uses for NBA players and the demands of the game. He's going to go through his specific squatting progression and how he will choose to load his players in the squat. So especially when you're talking 6'8" guys, 7-footers, what are you looking for there? And he's also going to dig into, and this could have been a huge rabbit hole, we just touched on it at the end for a little bit, but his speed and movement development for his NBA populations, and then some common causes of movement-related injury in the basketball population that he tries to mitigate. So a cool peek into the eyes of an NBA strength and conditioning coach who has awesome education, knowledge, and experience. Let's get to it, episode 127 with Chris Chase. Yeah. All right. Well, cool. Well, yeah. Well, here we go. All right. So, Chris, let's do this first question here. And we just talked about this here a bit before we push play, so to speak. But your take on the role of a pro strength coach versus one working in the college, high school, or developmental ranks. How do things change once you get up in that air of level of athlete, and then just the I don't know what I'm trying to say, like the structure of things up there?
Yeah, for sure. I think if you say role, I would say that it's similar, right? Like, I always believe that, you're still providing the same service at the same level. I think, when I'm listening to that question, maybe my first inkling is to say, okay, if I'm a college S&C, then I have academics to deal with, I have the school schedule to deal with, and them going to classes versus in professional sports, it is a bottom line space, and you have that one goal, like this person needs to perform at the highest level and be healthy and do their job, so I like that about pro sports for sure. Like we were talking about before we got on here, that I miss a lot of what college S&C was. Of course every space has their positive and negative, but what I respect in the professional or what I appreciate, I think, in the professional space is that bottom line nature, is to say, hey, this is a clear goal that we have, and this person's job is to make sure that this happens they have distractions, but with minimal distractions.
Oh, right on. So one of the things that I think I hear a lot, or you hear a lot with the pro level, is really like the role of like maximal strength, barbell work, actual strength work, like hard training, what we would consider hard training, right, compared to on the college level. And the perception that a lot of high level athletes have of what training is when you get them, and a lot of them having jumped right to the pros, right, from a younger age, and maybe their training age is less in terms of the world of the weight room and those types of things. So what's your give and take on how you do barbell training in your program with your guys?
It's the cliche. It's another tool. I'll first say that, and that's simply the way I look at it. And and this is the first time, again, before we got on here, first time that we have talked, and I know you said you can dive into some weird spaces when it comes to S&C, and I think I'll answer like this question similarly to say, and I've used this analogy before, but like, I'm with you that the loading is the piece in I think basketball, and especially in the NBA. That is the thing that is the differentiator to making a change, I think, or not. So what I mean by that is there is belief in intensely loading somebody. Now, why, of course, because this is sort of a societal norm in S&C that we go to the barbell to say, okay, that's your indicator of the strong exercise, or, the machismo sort of exercise is using the barbells or the dumbbells to load a player, and I've used the analogy of like, what if back in the day when we discovered strength and conditioning and training, somebody, pulled rubber bands off of a tree and realized that, hey, some of these rubber bands are harder and some of these are lighter, and if I pull on them, I get stronger and bigger muscles. Then we would be saying that bands were the thing. Like that was the, sort of, oh, this is the old school, way to train, and this is how you do things. And like, there's a similar vibe now. Thankfully, having perspective, looking at this person in front of me and saying, hey, my job as a strength and conditioning coach is to understand how to put you in good trainable positions that maximizes the good and minimizes the bad. And whatever way I can do that to load you at the intensity that I know I need to load you at, there's no doubt. Like we need to subject you to a level of intensity, from a loading standpoint to make an actual change. And we respect that. But we also respect that I need to know what a good position for you is, what that looks like just in general. So, hopefully you went to school to be a strength coach and you know some things. And then like, from there, what is your adaptation you're seeking, man? It's like, hey man, do you barbell back squat or do you do Olympic weightlifting or whatever? It's like, man, I haven't thought that way in, 5 years, where it was like, I'm doing the thing that gets me to the goal that we believe is going to make this person better at their sport or perform at the highest level, So, I'll spin that back to the question to say, where does that fit in? And I'll answer, I guess, more saying where loading fits in, and it's a big part of it. When it comes to the weight room, we know that being subjected to this external resistance and working in all these different planes and being strong and stable is something that, in basketball can be, something that can reduce the chance that you'll experience an injury. And, I think we know those things and we respect that S&C is a foundational part of basketball. And if you look in a weight room, a trap bar deadlift, a hack squat, things that we do on machines, isolated, more leg extension machines or calf raises and things like that, because we're looking at the sport and we're saying, what is the sport telling us that we need to do? And you may say, oh man, what's that dude doing on a calf raise machine or a leg extension machine? Man, that's not functional. It's like, well, we're looking at the sport and we're saying that this is a sport that necessitates a high stress or subjects you to a high tendon stress. And we know that, isolating maybe some things at the quad or the calf, doing some isometric work will lead to more healthy tissue and some tendons. And like, that is something that has been shown. And it's like, the sport is telling us that we need to buffer this stress. And how are we going to do it? Okay, well, enter it. This is something that, in the past few years, just being involved with basketball, ask me 5 years ago, and I'm not purchasing a leg extension machine and a seated calf raise, but now we are, because it's just like, man, this is bottom line, man. Like this is me doing my job because this is what has been shown to help this population, So, that's, loading for sure fits in. And, barbell work, a lot of barbell work is not on our guys' a lot of our guys' trainable menus right now, but that's not to say that it won't be at some point, for sure.
That's awesome. You caught me just as I was writing notes about the leg extension and the calf raise. Cause I do think one of the things that I have taken on completely. I think I've always kind of felt that way, but I heard it was funny. It was actually, I heard Andrew WK who said this, the musician, where it's like you want to explore the opposite of what you believe sometimes. Like, and if you're so hung up on, oh God, like machines suck and they would never work. Like, I don't know. Well, why don't you explore someone who actually uses them and kind of see what the results are, and like 100%. Why don't you look at, and or vice versa, or any training, or why don't you, if you hate balance training, look at someone who's training athletes using this and has a clear goal and intention for it. And
that's, man, that 100% too. And thankfully, to that point real quick is like, I'm so thankful that I've had worked with people, and credit to them, man, that are super intelligent and have had great perspective. Like, the things like unstable surface or balance work that we kind of, poo-poo a little bit as like cool, smart functional S&Cs. And there are things, there's research that has been done, and there are standards in maybe the physical therapy world that, man, I can't pretend to be so well versed and so knowledgeable that somebody that is working, progressing from a stable to an unstable surface and challenging them in different planes is not maybe something that we should be doing for basketball players who are subjected to high stresses around their ankle. Do we take it to the full other side of the spectrum and they just train on unstable surfaces? Probably not. But it's like, doesn't that make sense? For if you're letting the sport tell you like, hey, maybe this consistent work would make a more robust ankle. Wouldn't that make sense for a basketball player? So like a lot of that stuff really circles back around once you have perspective and hopefully some intelligent people around you to say like, oh yeah, yeah, no, you're on the right track, or no, it's like, oh, you're a dumbass, and that actually isn't good. So happy medium, I guess.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is really in the subtleties too, because it's like if you look at things as totally black and white, you could say the typical strawman argument is balancing on a Bosu ball doing, hula hooping, where we just take something that's totally
Right.
unrealistic. And I mean, I finally started to throw away some of my predispositions this past year and getting into like just work on PVC rolling pipes. And it's like something Marv Marinovich said, like your body will go till it finds that point where it finds balance in the muscles and can fire in the way the body picks the strategy. Like when you're locked in
Mm.
completely, the weights in the positions going to pick that strategy for you. So, and you
Oh
look
yeah.
at
Yeah.
how like a basketball player has to find a position in space for their foot to optimally hit the ground to redirect, to absorb force, to cross somebody over or whatever, or any sport. And it's like the more it's certainly made sense to me more, and I've seen reap some good benefits of that, and I'm looking forward to doing more of that myself. But yeah, it's definitely
Yeah.
anyways, I'm glad you brought that up with the physical therapist too, and then the
Sure.
stable to unstable and all that. I think it's really powerful stuff.
For sure. For sure.
Hey, I wanted to actually, I love that anecdote too. You said about like, well, if culturally, like, and right, well, like, where does everything start? Like, obviously, like, our culture of strength is wrapped around barbells and dumbbells and these things. And like, yeah, what if it was rubber bands? What if that was
Sure.
the
Yeah.
way? What if instead of bragging about how much you bench pressed, oh man, I put on, I bench pressed this black band or whatever. Like, that's now
Yeah,
the
yeah,
measure
yeah.
of
Or I
strength, right?
mean, 100%. Like that's and I think and there's more and more of this now, but it's all societal norms, right? Like breaking through these societal norms, and if you are uncomfy in that space, then it's hard to progress. But if you're comfortable there, and you can kind of block out the whole like, wait, what are you doing, man? It's like you can do some things, and if I like being in that space because it provides that perspective. It's like, hey, what if this was something else, and like, what would that then look like? It would still be principle based, and we would still be trying to achieve the same goals. So then, why am I wrapped into barbell training in a rack or a platform? So, and that piece has just never made sense to me. Which thankfully, it like lends itself to an open mind to explore other spaces.
You're listening to the Just Fly Performance Podcast, brought to you by Simply Faster. No, it's really cool, Chris. You talked too about so your menu. So I want to get into this. You got, I don't even know if it's a question, right? But you talked about your menu, barbells, and what barbells is really not on your menu. But you talk about
Sure.
the leg extension and the seated calf raise, and I it's funny because you would have asked me this again 5 years ago, and I don't have a seated calf raise in anywhere that I can use or train athletes with, but the more I look at just sporting positions and things, I'm like, you know what, this seems cool. And Dr. Yessis was into it, and like, it seems
Mhm.
like it has. So, can you explain actually a little bit about is that like tendinopathy stuff? Like, what are you getting out of those things?
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at again the sport to say what can we do for guys that are presenting with these pathologies, and again, like I'll speak in broad strokes here because I'll respect the fact that as just an S&C, I'm not going to be able to speak as eloquently as our physical therapist, but the sitting down and saying, you know what, man, like we're looking at this sport and we're looking at these pathologies and what these guys are complaining about, and we are seeing these tendinous issues and pathologies, and it's like, okay, what's out there that is talking about how to help this out, and buffer this from an S&C perspective. And as I think a lot of things are as we're going down the line, we're understanding that the dirty little secret is consistent loading of tissues in the right way. And some of the research that's out there talking about doing doing isometric holds for a certain amount of time, a certain amount of volume at enough intensity, is showing that you are buffering that load hopefully to the tendon, and some healthier tissue is being formed around it, or you're mitigating some of any of the detrimental things that are happening at the tendon. So it's like, okay, well, where are we seeing that? We're seeing that at the knee. We're seeing that Achilles tendon issues, and so where can we throw an iso hold and roll through that is calf raise, different calf raise variations, or something like a leg extension, or a single leg squat hold, or a wall supported squat hold bilateral, something like that. where we're challenging a quad. So different things for sure. I don't want to sit here and say it's like, oh, we're a calf raised leg extension program here, but again, it's just looking at the thing that works in our population, hopefully.
Yeah, I just had this funny thought of like, people are going to peg you Chris Chase's pyramid of performance. The bottom is leg extensions and calf raises.
I hope so. I would be down for that fun ride. Take me on that ride, audience, please. Bill me as the leg extension and calf raise guy. Oh, yeah. I can't wait for that.
We need one of those guys. We need one of those guys in the industry.
Yeah, right. I'll turn that into a gym somewhere.
Yes, no doubt. That's the only thing. You just walk in and that's it. Well, then you've seen those videos right on YouTube where it's like people turn it something into something it's not, or maybe it's that like the Dom Mazzati where it's just like everything. The arm curl is an arm curl machine or whatever.
Yeah. Oh man, that'd be fun.
Yeah, I'm sure. Creative juices would be flowing big time. Even just a couple workouts like that, I think lots of work could get done. So
100%.
So, anyways, I want to dig into your menu a little bit without being, I guess, too black and white, or it's just like, oh, tell me what you do, and then and how many sets and reps and whatever. So, but this is kind of maybe a little bit in sync with another question I had for you, but that's like the health performance spectrum, right? Like, how much of your menu is dedicated to like health? Like you were talking tendon health, continuous loading for the healthiness of the tissue, versus, I guess we would say, performance, strength. If a guy needs to pack on a little bit of mass or something like that, or the things that we would KPIs we would associate with being. And I guess, most of the guys you get are probably really good at those KPIs anyways, right? Like, could you break down a little bit of the menu in terms of like the health side of things and then things on the performance side, or what to be in a good position in sport? I hope I'm not complicating this. Anyways, the floor's yours.
I'm rolling. I'm rolling with you, man. No, I think again, listening to the question takes me to a conversation we've definitely had before. I think early on when I started in the NBA, and that was a quick realization that like this is sport is not health and wellness, man. Like especially when you get into pro sports, and this is a job. This is something that you're providing. You're providing for your family, and you're trying to do it for as long as possible. And you are really sacrificing some health because, our bodies aren't meant to be, playing NBA basketball for 82 plus games a year and traveling and doing all that sort of stuff that we know is part of pro sports. And so, it's an interesting question. And we've had so many conversations early on. It's like, what is our job? Like, is our job just to sort of buffer load? Is that like our main thing? It's like, is our job kind of acute to chronic where we're just like, we're making sure that, we are, there are no load spikes in what you do. It's just like this day-to-day monitoring and making sure that, there's nothing egregious happening, one way or the other. You're not underloaded or overloaded. It's like, is that our job? So I don't know. I don't know the answer. I think, people are lying to you if they say that they do. But again, to spin it back to the question, it's like, I would hope that, I hope everything is performance. I hope everything is well, I hope most is performance. I hope, all of it, of course, health and wellness. But like I've said before, everything has good and bad consequences. So, if we're chasing, for instance, one of the things we chase is maybe a 4 jump, for a player. And we're looking at, we're chasing strategy first and foremost, how you're doing that repeated jump, that reactive jump. And we're chasing that first, and we're measuring performance on a just jump mat and all that sort of stuff. And we're looking at that stuff as time goes along. And I use this as an example to say, yeah, man, I mean, jumping is a stressful thing, and I am saying that I believe going down this road is a worthwhile road because I know it's a stressor, because it's going to lead to performance changes for that person in a positive direction. But in the back of my mind, for sure, I'm always realizing that I'm respecting the fact that it is a stressor to that person. So because of that, it's, I have to respect, again, going back to understanding how to put this person in good positions. What does a good reactive jump look like? Repeating a repeated, a 4 jump. Like, what does good look like for that? And shit, man, like if I get him to that point, then that's not as much stress on his body. So let's chase that, let's go there. But I know I need to go there. So if you're looking around the weight room and you're saying, or you're seeing people that don't really look good in their movements, it's like, well, I don't think any of that is performance or health and wellness. I think that's more negative than positive. But I hope if you look around and you see, it's like, okay, the thing that, and I beat this to death with handle supported stuff, but like the thing that works for you is handle supported safety bar squat. And that's the thing that allows you to get into just some sort of trainable position. And so you say, okay, that dude looks like that's a good squat right there. And they've got 250 pounds on the bar. It's like, okay, I think that's performance because there's more, I think, good than bad there. Where it flips for me is if there's more bad than good. And I think there's more bad than good if I said, hey man, throw that barbell, put 200 pounds on that barbell and just put it on your back and just start down and up. I think most of the time, again, this is the population I work with, like freakish, these aliens, it's like you can't level change with a barbell on your back with 200 pounds on it. There's more bad than good. So that's not performance, So that's a whole nother conversation about the good positions and understanding how to put people in those positions, for sure. But I think then that turns into more health and wellness and positive performance than if you're kind of just messing around and you're not doing these things intelligently. Novel concept, but we know we don't see much of that.
Yeah, as you were talking, I kind of I love what you're talking about with the safety bar squat with the handles too. It brings me to it was an anecdote. I think Scott Salwasser, who's been on the podcast before, I think it was him who was talking about Aaron Gordon. I think it was Aaron Gordon, but like his deep squat was terrible. But you put him on a hex bar and he's fine because like he's just
Sure.
not meant. I mean, I can't imagine how many. I mean, you see the videos every now and then. Oh, look at my tall player deep squatting, and that's cool. But like,
yeah.
but I mean, how many of those players are truly like meant to do that in the sense of how worthwhile is it to get them there with that much weight on their back when how much easier would it be just to do what you're saying, just you can have this awesome position, you can eliminate probably the co-contractions around the pelvis and spine and all the compensations if you just say here's some handles and you go for it. And then probably the confidence in the strength coach too, because it's not hard or as injurious and those types of things.
Yeah, and that's where we come back to societal norms, where it's like, man, if you can get over the fact that this isn't about you, and you could just say, hey, man, this is what works for you. It may look a little different. You might not have been exposed to this before, might not have been in the football program, like whatever. It's like, but it's okay, man. Like we don't have to power clean from the floor. Like we don't have to, do barbell bench press. Like we have a horizontal pressing machine or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and it's like, not that I'm against bench pressing, because again, like, okay, I have, you have to have a caveat after everything you say, but it's like, man, if you saw somebody in a weight room that I was a part of doing some sort of like horizontal chest press, it's like some unilateral press. It's like, well, maybe I'm looking at thorax rotation, and maybe I'm PRIing this. Maybe I'm reaching with my right and finding left abs and doing an iso hold. It's like, it's just using the thing that allows me to get the thing that I need to get, man. And it's like, maybe after that, the dude is barbell bench pressing, but it's like, it's just you're using the tool, man. And I think once you get past this, like take that from the societal norms and dive in, like really intimately learn. It can't be a superficial level of learning, but really dive into some other stuff. And I think you come out on top, man. Like you start doing some things that are more about the person in front of you than your own program, I think.
Yeah, no, that's totally it. Is the person in front of you rather than your own program? Because I think a lot of people get into the industry because they like lifting weights and they probably had a good deep squat and bench press and those types of things. And so it's like once you get past that, idea to project all that stuff, and even me, I mean, I've had to get over the hump of I was a high jumper and triple jumper, and it's like I love plyometrics. All my athletes should do all these plyometrics, and it's like slowly
Yep.
but surely the plyometric load has been decreasing for a lot of these, and it's more about the essence of what they're actually doing with a little bit less intensive work. And
Right.
it's one of the things I was thinking of too is like, yeah, I mentioned like the position, but like you're talking about the position and the forward jump. It almost makes me think of like this goal of having a great position, eliminating compensations and bad movement patterns, and then getting athletes a little bit more elastic, being able to take advantage of the elastic system and not put as much muscle into everything. Like that's really the forward jump right there is, can you get in a great elastic position each hop instead of just, overbending your knees and over using your quads and all that. So as how you talked about the forward jump and what you're doing, that's kind of what struck a chord with me.
For sure.
Yeah. So Oh, sorry. If you're going to expand a little bit on
Oh,
that.
no. Go ahead.
Okay. Cool. Well, I love that stuff, man. So I want to talk, you mentioned you hit on PRI. I'd love to get into that. So you already talked about it a little bit, like just utilizing PRI in the program. I know the PRI stuff can just be like the ultimate rabbit hole, right? I'm sure you know that very well. And
Sure.
so how do you mitigate that rabbit hole? Like at what point are you going to put people on the wall or have them start utilizing some of the balancing work? And at what point do you just leave it alone?
Uh, yeah, I mean it's such a fun rabbit hole to dive into because it is part of it, or the main part is probably because everything. It's like the comic book quote that you die a hero or you live long enough to become the villain, and that's what happens with every three-letter acronym in our space. So and PRI is no different, and which is fine, and that has FMS has had the same thing, FRC, the list goes on, I guess. And thankfully now it's just it's so much more about perspective and understanding. And there's mistakes that have been made, I think, in the past for sure by myself and all of us, right, where you dive into stuff and it's like, man, now thankfully I've been enough, like I've been policed by enough great intelligent people that I've been able to maybe corral something into something that's practical and worthwhile in my application of whatever my philosophy is now. So I think the PRI space is something that has served me well, thankfully. And man, like let's be let's be all on one page here, where I'm not trying to be polarizing, where it's like, man, it could have been something else. Like it could have easily been like I could have gone down an FRC track with great practitioners and ended up in the same place. It's like, and that's the silly part now, thinking back on like, well, this is this and that is that and bad and good, and using those terms. It's like, man, I have no clue, and hopefully I respect that more. So needless to say, like, well, it kind of piggybacking, or coming back to the PRI piece, where I had practitioners around me that were very helpful in kind of digesting or helping me digest like some of the things that PRI was talking about, and it led to people looking better in the weight room. When it came to lifting weights, man, I think we were starting to we were putting people in way better positions, and they were feeling sore and feeling things that they were supposed to feel. And it's like, again, that could have been, if I dove into a different school of thought, come out the same way. Because before PRI, I'm not coaching a rib cage or a pelvis the way I coach it now. I'm not coaching interaction between feet and the ground the way I coach it now. I'm not coaching head position. I'm not coaching, scapula on rib cage position the way I coach it now. And I have to give props where props is due. That came from that school of thought. And, so it's then, the question is, okay, like, where does that fit into training? I don't think, PRI is synonymous with like, find and feel and breathe. Like, let's, again, put it in perspective. One thing that PRI has done for me is brought me back to kind of the yoga practice, and having now more understanding of putting people in good positions, now realizing how much yoga has respect for that as well, in terms of find and feel, sensory and motor skill, and really controlling these positions, breathing over those positions, blah, 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 all the things we know about yoga, which is obviously, the stereotypes of something that is flexibility and mobility based, I think are ridiculous. But, similar in PRI, where, if I'm doing a wall supported squat, is that PRI? Well, no, I don't think so. But am I cueing things that I learned from PRI? Yeah. Well, but that's just respect for something that I learned in school, or should have learned in school, anatomy and physiology, biomechanics, and those classes that should have taught me about these like rib cage mechanics and positioning of a rib cage to maybe take stress off somebody's back or activate some ab musculature that you're going for, or talking to me about different pelvis positions and understanding how to get somebody out of a bad position. Man, I didn't have that before PRI came around. So now putting somebody in a wall supported squat and then maybe adding some resistance and doing a reps with a foam roller behind their back, man, we can make that very, very hard. And most of that comes from the cues and things that I've learned from that space. So having nothing to do with like, getting somebody a balloon and having them do correctives. It really is more about the positions that I'm already, well, I'll say learning more about the right or more trainable positions to put people in. And when they're in those positions, how to make adjustments and how to kind of allow them to get in and out of those positions. That, and that's just S&C, man. Like, that I should have learned that in school. Like that should have nothing to do with like a school of thought, So, because I don't really like as a strength coach, I'm not applying sort of the school of thought PRI stuff because, I'm letting a physical therapist advise me on maybe on correctives and things that we may be doing to make that sort of change. But my S&C performance work is very much just respecting position. And again, like I just got a lot of knowledge from PRI.
Yeah, it's amazing how powerful position is, but how I don't, how few programs, if any, probably even cover that, or give you the tools to look at that stuff just because it's
100%,
yeah.
100%. And I mean, hey, like there's the perspective piece too of saying like, I don't want to make it sound because there may be that, there, and I'm always conscious of this. It's like, the people, like a small percentage of the people listening are going to take this maybe the right way, or the way I'm intending it. And it's like, when it comes to PRI, you may be saying, oh, well, this dude must like squat with a turtle shell back or something. And it's like, well, no, man, like, first of all, that's not PRI to me. Second of all, like, we're understanding that this is performance as well. So I understand that, again, everything, good and bad consequences. Like when we're in, you talked about the forward jump before. It's like, if we're forward jumping, am I forward jumping with a rib cage position that is neutral? Like, no, but I'm realizing that some of this just needs to be done because this person is choosing to play a sport that is a very stressful thing for them. And in order for them to survive injury free, we have to mitigate the load from repeated jumps off of a hard floor. And it's like, that just has to be done from a performance perspective. So if I'm working on the velocity of somebody producing force, man, hopefully that position is trainable enough to get the adaptation that we want to get with minimal consequences. But man, don't think that you're seeing a velocity based supine 90-90 balloon bridge. Like that's not what we're doing here. So it's a place. I mean, respect the hell out of it, but I respect the hell out of like all schools of thought, because they're all really bringing something to the table.
You're listening to the Just Fly Performance Podcast, brought to you by Simply Faster. Yeah, some of the people in my circle talk about like going full Bosch, like full Franz Bosch, like full water bags and full single leg cleans, all that stuff. It's almost like full PRI is when you're full PRI when you bust the balloon out. Like I feel like that's like this threshold, like until you bust the balloon out, you haven't like fully crossed the threshold.
But that's fine too, man. There's intelligent people that are listening to this that are going to say and think it's like, yeah, man, I use a balloon for something that's really good and trainable and that has an effect on somebody. But let's just remember perspective. It's like the whole team is not doing it. This is not for me. This is a test retest world we're in. Like, the reports are going to people that are saying, oh, well, there's some the big time stuff involved. And it's like, if I'm doing something, I better be making a change, and I better be making some sort of measurable change. And so I'm not just going to hang around and say, oh, we're just going to do a bunch of PRI stuff and that's what we're going to keep rolling with without it really having an effect. And we know that we have to do way more than that to have an actual effect on these guys.
Yeah, it definitely takes a while when they have like the pathologies and stuff. I was going to ask you with the forward jump. So you use the forward jump a lot. You were talking a little bit about just with the PRI. I was wondering, do you see anything that shows up in the forward jump that's a result of the pathology or that corrects itself at all and as a result of improving position through the PRI work?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think, again, we move away from PRI world and just say, okay, just in general, what do we do or what levers do we pull when we get somebody in here and, what do we have at our disposal to learn about this athlete? And of course, this person is, getting looked at from a structural standpoint and understanding, where these limitations are. And we know a common presentation maybe of a basketball athlete or a volleyball athlete or baseball or whatever, because of what they have to do. So you kind of know going in, but you want some things highlighted more objectively for sure to lead you on the right path, So, I think that once you start looking at that, like again, having nothing to do with PRI, and then we take a ton of video, for instance, like, we're videoing all our testing, our jump, four hop testing, and things like that. And you start to put some pieces together. But if you having an athlete that is presenting a ton of ankle stiffness, so limited in dorsiflexion, which most of these dudes do present with, and then looking at the consequences of that, maybe over time, and maybe some consequences have been whatever, as we know, upstream or downstream, that, some hip issues or some knee issues that are going on with this person, all these common things that these basketball players present with. I don't know if I would make then the leap to say that's showing up in their four jump. But yeah, man, I mean, you look at something and you say, like, man, like, look at how this dude interacts with the ground, because they're lacking, stiffness or tone, like in their Achilles, or something. Like, they interact with their ground on their toe. They have no stiffness or no control, so their heel collapses to the ground. And it's like, oh, what did we see on the table? And it's like, okay, well, what did their ankle feel like, physical therapist, and let me know, are you seeing this on the video? Like, do you believe that's a consequence of that? And I think that's that integrated approach that allows us maybe to do that. I think yes and no to answer that question, but it's certainly something that we're trying to do a better and better job of, because we know it's like I mentioned before, or maybe talking about like the bridge between S&C work and the sport of basketball. It's like the PRI conversation kind of jumps in here too, where it's like, man, I need to chase a four jump, knowing that maybe it'll never change, but we have a necessity of you getting off the ground quickly. I think improving strategy will allow that to happen, and mitigating some things. But at the end of the day, man, like, we kind of got to do it because it's close to your sport. And if you sprain an ankle and we need to have objective information before you go back into play. It's like, that's a great tool to be able to do it, because we know that's what you're going to be exposed to in the game, So I mean, that opens up, I think, another conversation with testing and what's relevant in this space. But at the end of the day, again, like, we're wrapping a bunch of conversations and questions together. We realize that it's a performance space, and maybe the structural assessment allows us, to have some knowledge here. But we also have to know that this person has to perform and get on the court and do their thing, man.
Yeah, oh, right on. So in terms of like the dynamic testing, because that's kind of a question that I had for you. Well, let me proceed with this before I get to that, because I want to ask you a little bit more about the four jump and the tests and kind of like dynamic performance markers. But you talked a little bit about the PRI work, activating the muscles, not being turtle backed. Like, I think I've seen some coaches where it is like get to this almost turtle back point, and then knowing me, I'm like, well, I have to try that, and then, well, my back hurts. Like, I mean, it's almost like just stuff was stretched. It's like crazy. Yeah. But anyways, I was going to ask you. So I think some people who've listened to this have heard, like, I did a podcast with Justin Moore talking about how to activate your hamstrings more through squats and deadlifts. But could you explain the wall squat? I think I know what you're talking about with the roller, but could you explain that a little bit, and then how you're progressing that into squatting and what you're looking for?
Yeah, 100%. What we'll get through, and I'm actually just clicking through on my own computer into that menu. But the wall supported squat starts with an isometric hold, and that's something where putting, again, that's, I think, something where we can train somebody pretty quickly off the bat, or make that trainable pretty quickly if you have that reference to the wall. Because we can manipulate your stance. We can put your feet further out in front of you, and hopefully not too far. And then your feet could be closer to the wall. So, the feet kind of tracking out in front of you, I'm starting somebody there to say, man, you are stiff as hell. Ankle mobility is limited. You like, this is going to be a tough road. We just need you to throw you into a position where you feel the right things. And sometimes that means, we're showing ankles directly under knees. And we're trying to progress you to show me some dorsiflexion with a grounded heel or a grounded foot, and moving towards that. And then up against the wall, what are we coaching? We're speaking to them, because before this, they have done, a belly lift. They have understood how to manipulate their spine. So we'll use those cues from maybe a bear hold or a belly lift up against the wall to talk to them about manipulating their pelvis or their rib cage into a position that we would say is, quote unquote, more neutral, or more beneficial to target than what we want to target. So we'll have them reach their hands out in front of them, hold that position at a depth that they can do, without being too overwhelmed, as this is kind of the first exposure. Cueing a ton about feet, cueing a ton about, they're a forceful push downward into the ground. Again, this isn't your grandpa's wall sit here where it's like shoot your legs in front of you and you just push your feet back against the wall, where you kind of could just rest there, I guess. But yeah, the how proactive, how active we are in that hold. Then we'll go into putting the foam roller behind the back, and we'll drop down into the ISO, same position. Like I'll cue them, hey, remember how you felt on the wall in the position of your torso? Do the same thing with this foam roller, and you could use a stability ball. This is the age old exercise, like Jane Fonda type exercise, right? Like foam roller behind the back is what we use mostly, and then you turn that into eventually just a goblet squat, wall supported goblet squat, where you're just rolling up and down there. So that goes from the first exposure, with the foam roller is what we'll do oscillations out of the bottom. So I'll put you in the bottom position and sort of teaching you to direct force where we want to, directly upward. We'll just move up, 20 to 30 degrees, and hold there for 2 seconds, come back down, hold for 2. And again, that's just learning, hey, direction of force in this is downward upward. It's not shoot your hips back and turning into, sort of a horizontal almost squat or, a powerlifting squat. So that's not what we're going for. So that's the reason for that. We'll go into some tempo work, like just use the 3 down, 3 up tempo once we jump away from the oscillations. And that's usually a body weight or just a small kettlebell. And then we're saying, okay, like we've checked all those progression boxes. Let's hit you with, a goblet kettlebell full squat, using the wall supported squat. So again, hopefully they have kind of learned that strategy by jumping or going through those gates. By the time then we get to that goblet squat, it's like, okay, then we're nailing this. You're nailing the concepts here. And from a structural standpoint, you've got, enough hip internal rotation and ankle dorsiflexion to probably load up a squat. I'll get you off the wall and we'll start, maybe we can get a supported safety bar squat going and dive into that progression. I know, just in speaking in generalities, and this is something we'll have soon, hopefully is a hack squat machine, for instance, is something I like to go from the wall then to a hack squat machine and load the hell out of a hack squat machine, but you still have like the same reference. So it's a kind of a similar thing to go from the wall to the hack squat. And again, like if we can roll with the supported safety bar, that opens up a lot of stuff on the menu. So, again, we certainly believe in I think, I'll speak for myself. I believe in loading, at the level that it needs to be with that high intensity. And, it just needs to be done in a trainable way. But each of those steps, think about it, it's like, man, I'm trying to hit you with an 80-pound dumbbell on a wall supported goblet squat. It's like, I just want to do the thing that I could load you the most in at that time. Mm-hmm. And it's like, if I support you on a wall, I know I can load you intensely as I can in a trainable way right now. So it's like, yeah, isn't that the old school way of strength and conditioning? It's like, that's what I'm trying to do, man. But it's like, I'm just putting him on a wall because that's the only way he's going to feel his legs, like that's the only way he's not going to feel his back. So I don't know if that have kind of explained the wall squat.
No, it did. And I like what you said, to the old school way, which to me is doing more with less weight. If you can do more with less weight, you're usually winning. And I think there has to be a particular abandonment of the athlete's ego to buy into that. But
Sure.
What I was going to ask you too, just with that wall squat, and I'll post a video in the show notes. I'm sure I can find one through the world of YouTube and Google. But so you're talking about the feet, and then so the athletes back on the wall or the roller or the physio ball, what cues are you giving to them through the back, and then what are you giving to them through the feet?
So usually like put a basketball player on a wall and maybe what are you usually seeing? Like, there's going to be space between their low back and the wall. A lot, again, like common presentation of, a thorax and like looking at a rib cage, like, they have a lot of these long limbs to control. So you're going to have to, again, like, kind of like I was saying with the cues in the wall squat, like cueing, you're going to have to go there probably to a certain extent, like cueing internal rib cage, internal rotation, again, to get them to flatten them out maybe against the wall, a posterior pelvic tilt, not to posteriorly tilt your pelvis excessively, but just to find, again, neutral. And then, hey, what do you feel like, for instance, like, because of course a player, the why, if I'm putting you on the wall, like, what is this doing, why are we doing this? And hey, manipulate your position here. Did you feel any stress, like being taken away from your back, for instance? That's an easy one, right? Like, they're definitely going to feel probably some tension be relieved by just that positioning. And there's maybe my inroad to speak to them about that why. And then kind of where we're going, like with a squat, it's like, hey, we're holding a body weight position for this reason. Like right now, we're just getting concepts and see what that did for you. Hey, do you feel your legs more? Do you feel your quads? Oh, yeah, I do. Do you feel anything in your back? Oh, no, I don't. Hey, have you ever felt like, low back soreness when you squat? Like, oh, yeah. Like, what squat did you do? And we build that story. So maybe through, again, the back, we're leading to a better spine position by coaching the pelvis and the rib cage. And, maybe for some guys who have a hard time getting it and they are, so what is your audible if that doesn't work? I love the band, like a really thin band around the back. And if you understand, like if you get yourself reaching, a lot of times that will allow that just RNT sort of feedback to then retract a rib cage. And understand like, hey, I'll try to cue exhales and different things to like, hey, reach and exhale, but it's a very hard concept to get at first. So the band, I think, gives that feedback to understand what we're trying to get out of that. Like we're trying to get rib cage retraction. We're not trying to get your shoulders like rounding and shrugging, which I think you'll see a lot of. So the feet thing is it's funny. I had a conversation recently talking about like how much we talk about heels, like heel interaction with the ground, and I've certainly been guilty of that and making good points about like, man, now I cue so much more about like full foot interaction with the ground, like using that terminology versus just talking about your heel. Because a lot of guys, you go from one pendulum to the other, and the front of your feet are off the ground, and we know like there's certain things that are happening if you don't have like force distributed through your entire foot. So we're trying to cue that with a downward push with showing us show me some dorsiflexion, because I think initially, for instance, like they dive into the wall squat, they get up on their toes, maybe, and their heels are kind of off the ground, or their weight, they've translated their knees forward and their weight's forward on their feet, and they're like, oh, my knee, my knees hurt, oh, my knees always hurt when I go into a squat. And it's like, okay, right, like let's work with this, and by coaching feet and maybe giving some tactile feedback, like maybe pulling around their feet in different places where they're not interacting with the ground, push against me. Hey, what do you feel now? Do you feel less in your knees or the front of your knees? Do you feel more muscle coming on? Do you feel more quads? It might be a guy that we say, hey, move your feet back closer to the wall. And again, they hesitate. But that's where the graded exposure comes into play. Like first set, we hold for 30 seconds and your feet are kind of, hey man, put your feet wherever you want, wherever you feel comfortable. And then second set, it's like, hey, do you feel quad on that? Did you feel anything else? No, I was good. No knee pain, just, burning at the top of my thighs. And it's like, okay, move your feet back a little bit. Still the same. Oh yeah, still the same. And by the, time you're done with 3 or 4 sets, you're in a trainable squat position, almost if you were off the wall, and that's maybe what we're looking for with obviously on the wall being a more vertical torso. But yeah, so that's maybe, more than just the spine and feet, but I don't know if I touched on or answered that question.
You're listening to the Just Fly Performance Podcast, brought to you by Simply Faster. No, you did. I love digging into that stuff. We do these shows, you try to hit the question list, right? But like for me, it's like the gold is in some of the little stuff, like the foot, especially like a lot of things people don't. Usually, a lot of strength coaches will just leave it as push through the heel, and we'll just leave it there. I think the world of strength and conditioning is definitely getting out of that, I believe. But but. It's one of those things, like I did a podcast with Gary Ward and digging into what he's doing. It's like his thought is that if you have an upstream problem, like he'll use wedges in the foot to give you sensation in a part of the foot that isn't getting it. And then all of a sudden your knee pain goes away, your hip pain goes away. Like just because all of a sudden you can press properly through your base. It's like your car, you just put air in your tire, that tire that didn't have air in it before. And so
And that's where we go back to the PRI or the part of me the yoga conversation as well is like, man, nobody in my education or the S&C sort of stereotypical S&C field was talking to me about this, some of the sensory stuff, like find and feel and like really understanding how to control a position and move yourself in and out of that position with the muscles that you want to use. And man, nobody like not until I started diving into yoga did I really like a yoga teacher was the first person to talk to me about like manipulating your pelvis and like talking to me about like tucking your pelvis underneath you and like all that sort of stuff. And man, if you get by like some of the perception of foo-foo and like aligning your chakras and different stuff like that, it's like, man, dive into the anatomy of that. And there's some things there. Like there's some things that you could probably benefit as a strength coach from learning. So it's the same thing with PRI where it's like the find and feel and sensory stuff is the stuff that has helped me in my own training the most because you're driving these huge aggressive movements with things that like for me ended up causing, knee, back pain, all those things that we all experience. So man, respect to it, respect to how trainable it can be and the adaptations that can come from just good isometric holding and sort of moving slowly in and out of some of these movements. Again, fundamental movements. I'm not saying like, hey, just go out there and crawl around and do whatever. Like I think I've learned where it's like hone in on if we're going to be squatting with a safety bar on our back, maybe we should really have ownership of get this level change that necessitates so much complexity, and that takes really working this sensory and sort of tempo work before diving into more loaded stuff.
Oh, right on. Quick meathead question too, or just general simple question. Like I like to ask complicated ones. This one's very black and white. Is how much dorsiflexion are you usually aiming for once they are doing that loaded squat, that safety bar squat? How much are you looking for those tibias to translate forward?
Ooh, well, man, I that's like I'm gonna show you a person that I'm gonna show you 15 different guys that are showing 15 different angles of dorsiflexion. So and that's man and that's the reason to throw out the supports and all these like supported versions of different things is to say I'm challenging you, I'm meeting you in the middle, man. I'm challenging where you can go right now that's not causing stress for you. And for those guys who are really limited, that's where, again, I think a hack squat is a better play. Like, guys that have so much stiffness and a level change for them, if consequently they've, it's either like ankle stiffness or knee pain or whatever, and you see how they load a jump, for instance, very hip dominant, like really avoiding any sort of like anterior translation of knees or any sort of dorsiflexion, maybe when they run and things like that. Like that dude is hesitating to bend his knees because the rigors of basketball over time have led to that hesitation. And it's like, man, I know I want to load your quads, man. I know that would be beneficial for you, in addition to all the other stuff. But it's like, man, right now it's like, we'll chase dorsiflexion with you, man. But it's like, we might need to just throw you on this to get what we want to get, because it's the easiest thing for you.
Oh, right on. No, I think that's awesome stuff. Yeah, it's about the athlete, not what you like to do. Unless you
Sure.
like to hack squat, maybe you like to hack squat.
Yeah, no doubt. It can have its benefits. I mean, throw you on some single leg isos on a hack squat, man. That's certainly a thing.
Yeah. Oh, right on. So really quickly, last bit, and I just wanted to follow up a little bit on the forward jump, but
Yeah.
I know the forward. One of the questions I had was just. Outside of just the pure health spectrum of things, if we're looking at performance, like the forward jump, taking the muscle slack out quickly, being able to get off the ground quickly, is there anything else that you really find yourself doing with the sense of improving speed, jump, court movement ability, qualitative movement ability? And shoot, I probably didn't give it a lot of time. It could be a huge question, a whole show in itself. But if you could give the nutshell version.
Yeah, no, for sure. I know more and more, hopefully every year we audit ourselves and realize, what's worthwhile. And I think there's things that are definitely worthwhile in our environment, and we should chase and try to improve and keep measuring. And some things would be, more valuable in other environments. So maybe I'll speak in more general terms, but for sure, I respect the hell out of that space. Understanding how to coach jumps, hops, bounds, understanding the stress like you talked about as a track and field athlete. Like I don't think we really have the respect, man. You look at track and field athletes, they look unreal going through their plyometric programs, and it's a beautiful thing. But man, there's a small population of people that can do that sort of stuff in a really like not that stressful way, So, we certainly teach chase strategy change and are testing jumps and hops. We're certainly looking at like force production via a force plate and chasing CMJ strategy. I think chasing and I'll say this about maybe a volleyball sport as well. Like, if you're testing or you're working with volleyball players, I know the person I talked to that really changed the game for me with CMJ, kind of chasing CMJ strategy, is somebody that has worked with volleyball players and has showed some great changes with that. So, have been on that in programming for a long period of time, and we certainly test and want to measure some things there. We are the speed part is a bit different, I think, in the NBA. I don't think we've gotten there with you can talk about maybe a 10-meter sprint or a flying start or whatever. And there's some maybe standards we can look at and totally respect that. I think there's a more basketball oriented test, like not that it's going again full Franz Bosch here, but it's like, man, they're from a speed standpoint, I think it looks more like what their fingerprint in the game looks like, like what does John Wall's test look like versus a post player, or somebody that's kind of lumbering around out there. Like that's a different test, and a lot of people like a linear sprint. It's like, okay, maybe you could hit me with, there's some return to play situations there, but man, I think it looks more like, hey, this pick and roll, this drill that we're doing, and like your performance in, something that we would consult with a coach with in pick and roll or whatever it is, or getting around a screen, or, you're going coast to coast and you're a point guard and you're getting around three defenders. Like, what does that look like? And are we improving that maybe? But when it comes to just the training piece of all that, diving into the speed, agility, quickness space, as we would call it, that's a huge, huge, huge part of our program. It's a huge piece, I believe, as a part of the bridge to really take a lot of the cueing and things we do in the weight room and provide more of a bridge to look more like what they're going to do on the basketball court. So we certainly teach the fundamentals all the way down to, our linear speed mechanics. We're doing hard starts and soft starts. We're teaching 2-point staggered stance. We're understanding what it means to accelerate out of that position and how to do that in a trainable way. Our lateral speed mechanics and teaching directional steps and teaching how to slide and get out of those steps with a plyo step, or how we open up our hips and get into a slide, and how do we take certain angles. Do we choose a crossover step? Do we choose a directional step? And I think that's the piece of just exposing you to the whole menu in the speed, agility, quickness world that you're going to see in basketball. Our back pedal work, how do we back pedal and get out of a back pedal and sprint? Man, that's cost some people some Achilles in the past. It's like we have to include that in our program, and we have to be able to do that in a trainable way. So, and that's going to start with a backward march. That's going to start with a 2-point staggered ISO hold. That's going to start with, a march ISO hold into a sprint. Then we're, back pedal ISO hold into a sprint. Then it's finally our back pedal into a sprint. And it's like those fundamental skills I think are hugely, because think about what we're trying to do. We're trying to bend and change levels and push yourself in different directions using, which is basketball, using a trainable strategy that's hopefully using it is, there's minimal compensation there. We're loading, active tissues. We're not relying on passive structures just to bounce around. When you change direction into a crossover step, you actually know how to you actually choose to change levels and flex and dive into kind of a squat position before you go out of that position or before you change direction. Man, like those are things that, basketball athletes floating around at 6, 8, 7 feet have a tough time doing. So, the things we talk about in a squat and like loading quads and referencing the ground, it's like we try to do that. And it's like, get into your ISO hold to do a crossover step. And it's like, okay, pushing into the ground. Remember what we talked about in the weight room when it comes to head position and rib cage position, like, all that sort of stuff. It's like, I love how much that then translates what is done in the weight room, more towards basketball. And as time goes, just like any progression, as time goes along with both, jumps, hops, bounds, and speed, agility, quickness. It's like we try to advance as far as we can, but it's still the trainable menu. It's still, only going to a point with a certain person, and it's a person that bounds are probably never going to be in the cards, not for a lot of basketball players, for instance. Like, maybe because of somebody's pathology, we don't do a lot of hard starts, because of because of an Achilles issue and continually like a hard push off start. So it's still the trainable menu concept, but we know that we need to have a healthy dose of it. And then you work with your sport coaches and you start to, you add a ball, or you add reaction to your general speed stuff, and you add a basketball, and it's, limited skill work, and then it's reaction, and we add body, all that stuff is definitely a part of it for sure. And as an S&C, I think you got to be well versed, and you got to have like, man, we have, as American S&C coaches, we have stuff in our bag in the weight room, but not a lot of people got stuff in their bag when it comes to speed, agility, quickness, and jump, hop, bounce, man. Like it's bad. Like, and man, I'm telling you, I think with good, like a quality jumping, if you're chasing strategy and you really know the jumps and the hops and that sort of work, and you can progress it well, man, you start changing some things for basketball players, because they've never been taught this sort of stuff, like how to really load and, think about a basketball player dropping into a counter movement jump, or doing a test at the combine. I brought this up before, like watch the NBA combine and see the vertical jump testing, and how bad the strategies are, like how weirdly they land. Like, it's like, man, they have chosen to jump like with the best people in the world using that strategy. It's like, man, that's crazy. So we could go into the whole, like, if you change your strategy, do they get worse thing, but we don't have time for that. But yeah, for sure, like those pieces are huge parts of what we do.
Yeah, good stuff, Chris. Man, I that single question could literally be a whole podcast. Would
No,
love
100%,
to, would love,
100%.
yeah, would love to explore every bit of it. But for now, I think our time is up. So thank you so much for being on, man. I really appreciate it, and awesome stuff today.
Sounds good. I appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for tuning in with us, guys. Appreciate you being with me on this journey of exploring the corners of our field. Not only speed and track and field and jumping, which was in many ways where this podcast started and specialized, but just in reaching out to all the areas, the pro, high school, college, people working with youth athletes and beyond in all sports. And it's just really cool to talk with experts and people as knowledgeable as Chris. So, as always, visit our sponsor, simplyfaster.com. Suppliers of high-end training technology, Freelap timing system, K-Box, PowerDot. They have awesome stuff in their shop if you are looking for that technological edge in your training. Great blog, too, so check them out. And we'll be back next week with another great guest.